Travis Wayne Goodsell. It is that time of year again when I do my tribute to Joseph Smith Jr. Last year was sabotaged, along with some other traditions that I tried to establish while being all alone. But so far this year, after the initial attempts, I'm getting back into traditional situations, but it is the final year of the latter days, which means this isn't going to last long. The question is, how long do I have? But if I finish the video before 9, then I'll have it up for you this evening. Otherwise, it'll be done in the morning. So you'll know by the time you see the time it's been out and below you, below the video. To give you a background, when the church was studying the Doctrine and Covenants in 2017, it was nearing the end, and so it was getting close to the Carthage jail incident. And my neighbor, I knew me and the wife that was on her way out of the marriage at the time, and he was sitting in Sunday school and had been studying the Carthage lesson in advance, and asked me when I came in and sat down across the aisle from him if I knew that Joseph Smith had a gun in Carthage jail. And I said, yeah, my third great grandfather is John Solomon Fulmer. He gave him his pistol as Joseph had assigned him to go get the Nauvoo Legion, and was the one who he gave all the secret information to that evening after the others were asleep. As it's reported that Joseph put his head on his shoulders. And so yes, my Fulmer family, which is my dad's mom's side, have that super sacred secret information. And he responded, did you know he had two? And I went, no, I didn't. And so I went home and began a research, as I do with all of my research studies. I deciphered Paleo-Hebrew using scientific methodology, and so it was the same method that I used to study church history. And as I got into it, I found that it was Wheelock was the guy who gave the 6-shooter, so that I learned that it was the single shot that my third great grandfather gave to Joseph Smith, who then gave it to Hiram as he took the 6-shooter. And as I kept going, I ran into some serious issues, and I stopped my investigation of the crime scene. and I went back to the beginning of church history. It started with Joseph Smith Sr. having gotten married to Lucy Mack, and they had their children there in Vermont. That's where I chose to begin my research from the beginning. It is important when you're investigating a crime scene that in order to understand what happened, you don't just study the crime scene alone. You study what led up to the crime scene and what happened after the crime took place. You follow the money, as one example. And so that's why I had to go back to the beginning, because of what I had found in my investigation. It required to learn the real church history. And so I learned, as those of you who have been watching my videos all these years, as I would do real super long videos, going them over with you as I'm investigating, that Joseph Smith Sr. was a Jewish Kabbalist in Vermont. Nathaniel Wood had formed a Congregationalist organization called the New Israelites, and it was Jewish Kabbalist. And that's where all of the Revelation, Hebrew, second or latter days, the coming of the Christ, the Israelites being the children of Israel, and all come from. So the Holiness to the Lord parchment, yeah, that's why. It's Jewish mystical, not witchcraft. I see too many ignorant people just lump it all together. It's called anti-Semitism. Jews are not witches. Jewish mystics are not witches. And if I have to explain mystic to you, that's where mysteries come from. Mysteries come from the Greek word mysterion, which translated into our English in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it's called initiatories. So just replace mysteries of God with initiatories of God. And that should explain what Joseph Smith is talking about, and the Book of Mormon for that matter. And when he moved to Palmyra, he was able to acquire the farm in Manchester, as he, in May of 1818, became a master mason of the Yorkites Freemasonry. And again, ignorant people lump Scottish rites and York rites together as all the same. York rites are the 33 degrees, or Scottish rites. York rites are the Knights Templar. A big difference, because there is no Knights Templar in the Scottish rites. And so all of the lore of Friday the 13th, Egyptian gold plates, coming to America, buying the land of the east half of the United States, and placing the Egyptian gold plates in the caves in southern Illinois, where in the latter days X marks the spot for the location of Zion, where the Christ of the Knights Templar, the Holy Grail bloodline, would rule and reign after the enemy destroyed the United States of America. And they knew all this in 1363. And so likewise, Joseph Smith Sr. knew all about this. Should have had water with me. And so life was normal for the Smith family. There is nothing weird or unusual. Joseph Smith's visionary accounts are just that. They are not literal history. As he would go on to talk in the 1830s to certain individuals, he had to word things a specific way. You don't talk to a Jew about Jesus Christ appearing to you and talking to you, for one example. You speak in the learning of the Jews. Christians, well, yeah, you do use Jesus because they understand Jesus. It's not the correct Jesus that Joseph Smith was talking about in the learning of the Jews, but they're not going to understand you. They won't be receptive if you come right out. But there's another reason why Joseph had to encode his information in visions and dreams. And it has to do with William Morgan, who came to the Canandaigua Lodge where Joseph Smith Sr. was the Master Mason. And he had been paid in advance to work on books exposing the threat to the United States of America by the Scottish Rites, who had been infiltrated by the Illuminati, founded by Johann Adam Weishaupt of Germany. He had formed his Illuminati on the 1st of May, 1776. And their tactics were the same the whole time. They infiltrated an organization. They increased in number. They increased in rank. They coup the organization. Then they destroy it and rise up with a new world order. They did that with nations and all sorts of different groups. And that was their plot to do to the United States of America. They paid, or they were able to recruit Nathan Rothschilds, or Nathaniel Rothschilds? Nathan Rothschilds. It's Nathaniel Wood and Nathan Rothschilds. And it was Nathan who paid for the War of 1812, which allowed for the Illuminati to get into the United States of America and begin to infiltrate the Scottish Rites Masonry. And that's somewhere in all of that, William Morgan learned of the whole plot, the very graphic details of the plot. And you're thinking, well, how would you know, Travis? What book? There was no book. He had been working for years with Joseph Smith Sr. on the book. Like I said, he was advanced money. But on 9/11, yeah, it's a common number or date for them, 1826, they found out what he was up to, that he had known about it. And they falsely accused him of not paying a bar tab. And it was a small amount. He could have easily paid for it, but back in those days, you get locked up, you can't work on the book, you go to debtor's prison. And so it was a clear threat to his life with this arrest, this false accusation. They were going to murder him if he continued to work on the book. So Joseph Smith Sr., who was helping with this book as the Master Mason, was duty-bound to protect his fellow Freemason brother and helped him flee the country. And then he had to figure out how to finish and publish the rest of the book. It's clear he knew Sidney Rigdon. And linguistic science confirms Sidney Rigdon is the major author of the Book of Mormon. But people are unaware or they don't know who wrote the rewritten 116 pages. This is where I come in. Joseph Smith Jr., because he was not allowed, according to the rules of Freemasonry before 1826, they changed afterward, he was not allowed to become a member of Freemasonry because a family member cannot be at the same lodge as a member. You can attend their several meetings as often as occasion would permit. Yes, I'm quoting from Joseph's visionary account. But you can't be a member of the same lodge. So Hiram Smith, yes, he was a member of the Palmyra Lodge. And that eliminated Joseph from becoming a member of any lodge because there wasn't any close enough within traveling distance for him to attend and become a member of. And so if you're junior and you had your choice of attending the Palmyra Lodge with your brother or going with Daddy, where he's the Master Mason, down to his lodge, which would you choose? Well, it's clear Junior is a daddy's boy. And the Book of Mormon tells us that too. Yeah, you're smart enough to figure out I'm talking about the Book of Mormon. It finished. It was finished. It is that book. And so Senior, because Junior knew about this plot, had arranged for Junior to be the Christ. Senior being the bloodline, the Holy Grail. And I know it's not Christian. It's the reason why they put at the beginning of the book, you're supposed to use the learning of the Jews' language of the Egyptians at the beginning so that you correctly interpret the book. It was not given the subtitle, Another Testament of Jesus Christ. Our Christ is Amun, the sun god at noonday of the Egyptians. It is Emmanuel, the god Amun. And so, Junior, I knew Martin Harris. Martin Harris knew of Joseph and his little rock and a hat trick because Joseph found the rocks in the well that he dug for Martin Harris. And had played his little rock and a hat trick for Martin Harris. And so they had Joseph ask Martin Harris if he would pay for the book, for the publication, when he finishes translating it. It was in the hands of Sidney Rigdon, because everybody was looking for those manuscript pages. The enemy wanted to destroy them, and others wanted to find them to know what was this secret plot to destroy America that William Morgan disappeared for, which resulted in the anti-Mason movement, which ended up burning almost all of the Freemason temples, both Scottish Rites and York Rites temples. Because again, the news reporter lumped them all together as the same. And so Martin Harris, as we know, wanted to be involved. He wasn't going to just hand over money to have the book published. He wanted to be involved. And he wanted to see the plates. And so Joseph scribbled on what's now the Anton transcript that Martin Harris, once he received it, immediately ran off to New York to get them verified as legitimate characters. And we know that story, and we know the correction of that story. And so the reason why Martin Harris stole the 116 pages was because those were the original copied, because Joseph Smith says he spent some time before Martin Harris got there copying the characters from the plates. He's copying the original manuscript onto another manuscript. That's why Martin Harris never saw him with the plates. He had purposely put up the blanket curtain, whatever, to shield Martin Harris from seeing the plates. So Martin Harris only knew of Joseph and his rock and a hat. So we assume that's how it was done. And that's how he wrote it. And in his little journal that now the church confesses, and Nelson did his little thing showing us how it was done. And ex-Mormons all, cry foul. And D. Michael Quinn calls it witchcraft. That was all just for show. Joseph Smith was the distraction so that Sidney Rigdon can work on the book. That's all Joseph Jr. had to do, was babysit Martin Harris to make sure that when the book is completed, he would pay for it. And unfortunately, when they were about finished with the original manuscript pages that he had received and had copied, his firstborn son died. Joseph Smith III was what they named him. And this was a devastating loss. Emma was a Methodist, and thus Methodist. Sidney Rigdon was Baptist, and the Presbyterian was the pastor at the funeral of Alvin. That's why those three are mentioned in the visionary account. And so you don't ever hear about Congregationalists. You don't ever hear about New Israelites per se. You do read all about the New Israelites and Jewish Kabbalah and York Rites, Freemasonry, with the Knights Templar, not just in the visionary account, but in the Book of Mormon. And so this Joseph and Emma attended her Methodist church during this time of consolement, and so Joseph apparently didn't think anybody would know of this incident, as he would go on in 1838 in his visionary account to claim that he was not participating, even though he was somewhat siding with the Methodists. but then talks to a Methodist preacher who says there are no such things as visions and revelations after the death of the apostles. It had to do with his rocks in a hat trick that Joseph got arrested for, which, according to his visionary account, he wasn't allowed to have until 1827, a year after the 9/11 1826 incident. They had to lay low for a whole year before letting it be known that Joseph had been working on the book since 1827 to distance as much as possible from that William Morgan scandal. Because if people are able to figure it out, they're in big trouble. They'll infiltrate their organization that they were going to form. They would rise in number. They would raise in rank. They would coup the church. They would murder the leaders and take it over and destroy it with the New World Order. Now, do you see why I went back to the beginning? And so the Methodist preacher knew about Joseph's getting arrested for glass looking on the 20th of March 1826, before William Morgan, because of his working for Josiah Stoll. And his nephew, I think it was not happy with it and had him hauled off to Bainbridge. Is that the court in New York? Which was north of what used to be called Harmony, Pennsylvania. Used to be. It was no longer called Harmony by the time the Smiths arrived in Palmyra. That's important to know, because they wouldn't have known unless they had learned that it used to be called Harmony, but because of the Postal Service, it was no longer called Harmony. Can't have two harmonies in the same state. Be confusing for the postal workers. And so, yeah, all of this occurred in Harmony, north of Pittsburgh. And yes, I know all about the sale of land by Emma's father to Joseph Smith for $2,000 after receiving the plates and needing Martin Harris to pay for it, which the publication cost was about $2,000. So what is he doing, losing Martin Harris as the money man and paying for a house in a place that's not called Harmony, but on the deed of sale they call it Harmony? Yeah, it's all part of the cover, because Martin Harris was on the anti-Mason committee in Palmyra. They can't disclose the truth to Martin Harris because he thinks that all Freemasonry is evil. He doesn't know, and they don't know to trust him to tell him the truth, that the Scottish Rites were the threat to America, and they need to get this book published, because he tends to be a blabbermouth, as well as hung up on the frenzy of the anti-Mason movement. And so thus they can't disclose anything to him. But in the process of the child dying, Martin Harris, uncomfortable with the amount of Freemasonry that's in there, steals the manuscript pages and heads off to his committee to see if they think that there's anything to this. So Smith had to come up with a new plan. And that's when Section 3 is written by Senior. And he knew about Harmony in Susquehanna River that was no longer called Harmony, and they set this all up. Because Emma's parents, likewise, can't stay in Harmony north of Pittsburgh either, thanks to Emma being married to that Joseph. And thus, they went and found land down in Harmony, Susquehanna, where Joseph was on a timeout for a whole year. As Sidney Rigdon could just continue on with the book, but now the 116 pages needed to be rewritten. That's where Senior took over. He is the author of the first and second Nephi in the Book of Mormon, and likely he went as far as to the Words of Mormon, where he talks about in chapter 10, which was 1829, not 1828. There's a big difference. And it has to do with Joseph Smith's miraculous powers of translating with the gift and power of God in 1.5 months, not 3, with Oliver Cowdery. Oliver Cowdery was the scribe helping Sidney Rigdon out in Ohio. And so when the book was pretty much finished at that point and they needed to transfer the writing onto copper plates to then be given to print press, copper plates. Yeah, but it's gold because of the Knights Templar. But yeah, copper makes it lighter to carry. But Joseph had nothing to do with this. This is where apologists get the church in trouble when they try to protect and defend the church. They expose the truth by exposing things the church did not want revealed. Thus why they excommunicated September 6. They had kept all that a secret, and they kept it hidden in their archives, but September 6 were good, faithful Mormons. They were allowed access, and they found things they shouldn't have, and the church had to excommunicate them, and that caused a big stir. Gerald and Sandra Tanner got wind of it and helped make it popular, and the church got damaged from that. So they had to go on an anti-intellectualism movement at the Pulpit of Conference. They had to do a lot of damage control with what those Mormons had done. And they were faithful Mormons. They were trying to reconcile what they had found with what the church had been telling them. But the church didn't want them to release that information. The church wanted that kept a secret. And so now, thanks to Gerald and Sandra Tanner, the church, after all these decades, have now found original documents and are pretending that they're being transparent. And they've got the Joseph Smith papers available for us, which, if anybody would actually read it like I do and do videos for you, the church is not true. And there's more to that. But, yeah, we know that Martin Harris was contacted again when the book was finished, and with the changes, he found it acceptable, and the guilt trips about him being an evil man got to him, and he was willing to sell the farm to pay for the book this time. And And so the church gets started on the 6th of April, 1830, with 6 sons of the Smiths, Oliver Cowdery, the Cowderys, and the Whitmers, as a direct counter to Johann Adam Weishaupt's Illuminati of 5 on the 1st of May, 1776. And it's also 6th of April because they knew Joseph Smith Sr.'s Kabbalah of the latter days and the plot of this enemy to destroy America. And so they knew the time frame. They were using the Bible to coordinate their attacks and prepare and plan for that latter-day time period. They were going to fulfill the villain part of the prophecy and prove that Christianity is a fraud, that Jesus does not exist, because Roman Emperor Constantine created him. And so they're planning on destroying Christianity. And so, yes, 6th of April, 2024 is Saturday. This enemy that formed into a religion were planning on holding their general conference on that Saturday to rededicate the completion of their temple with the Illuminati symbol on the keystone of the doors at their headquarters temple. Yes, I'm talking about the Church of Jesus Christ, the great and abominable church that Joseph warned us about, that the Book of Mormon warns us about in very graphic detail. And I did the Constitution conspiracy of the church earlier today, and nobody believes. You can't just pick and choose what you want to believe with what I talk about. You have to accept all of it as fact. That's why you have to listen to the end of all my videos, because you run into huge errors if you just pick and choose what you want to believe. There are contradictions, there are confusions, there are problems with that kind of thinking that you conclude with if you do not take my whole videos in its full context. I did the work through science-based methodology. This is not my opinion or spiritual witness. Heber C. Kimball, under Masonry, reveals he knew of this plot. And I will be doing this video tomorrow. As I see the time on the clock, as well as the timer on the video, or the recorder, whatever. He says in 1823, he received the Master Mason rank. All 3 in 1 year, 1823. What happened in 1823? Joseph Smith in 1838 claims he was visited by Nephi and was given the key of authority for the stick of Judah and Joseph combined into one. And no, it's not the Book of Mormon. I just did that video. It was a 3.5 hour video. I told you to get popcorn and Mountain Dew. And so, also, Joseph Smith in 1842, in the Scottish Rites Lodge of Warsaw, he was made Master Mason of the Nauvoo Lodge. That needed to still be built, but they were able to have it in the mansion, which was also used for the temple. Until the Nauvoo temple would be completed, Joseph would go on to be assassinated. But Joseph becomes a member, and then on the 15th of March, 1842, he then becomes a Master Mason. And on the 17th of March, he again rushed for the Relief Society after becoming a Master Mason, because he knew when the bloodline Christ would come in the latter days. Joseph Smith is only the foundation Christ. The capstone Christ is what Joseph was preparing for. He knew of his birthday. And so gave women the priesthood and priesthood office, but let them do whatever they wanted with the organization. And we have that document in the Joseph Smith papers. So this church is lying to us about women and priesthood office. It's an outright blatant lie. It's an outright malicious lie. And again, you had to see the video I did earlier today. It's blatantly obvious this church is wrong, and this, on Heber C. Kimball, reveals it. And so he's taking it from 1823's second vision of the day that shall burn as an oven, and they that come shall burn them. That's what he's doing by saying 1823. He's already in the valley here. He's writing in his journal after the fact, after murdering. Oops, spoiler alert. Joseph and Hiram. And then referring to the 3 craft degrees because Joseph did in 1842. Now, Victor Flats is in red. It was destroyed, and there were no records recovered from Victor Flats. And so the information on Wikipedia has been taken down, and so the link is no longer valid. That's what the red means. But it's in Scottish Rites territory. It's not York Rites. But he goes on to say, in 1824, '24, '25, '26, '27. This is the first time Joseph Smith goes to the Hill Cumorah, which was just up the road from the farm, and is instructed by William Morgan, Nephi, about the latter days. This is what Joseph is revealing to us, and this is what Heber C. Kimball is exposing here, that he knows about Joseph Smith's first vision and his connection to William Morgan with the threat to America. Because in 1824, he says that he sent a petition to the lodge at Canandaigua, New York. You can't do that back before 1826. If you're a Scottish Rites, you have to stick with the Scottish Rites. You have to appeal to another Scottish Rites Lodge for rank advancement. He's revealing what Joseph did, even though he did not become a member of the York Rites. But Hiram did, because Hiram became a member of the Scottish Rites in 1842. And this is what he's now indicating here when he says that he, as a Scottish Rites Master Mason, he goes to Canandaigua York Rites to petition to become a Royal Ark rank, not degree. See, he's mixing that up. Degree is Scottish Rites. Ranks are York Rites. I mean, you can attach a degree to them, but it's only 10. And so this also reveals that Heber C. Kimball knew of William Morgan, because William Morgan appealed and petitioned to become a Royal Ark Mason, which is rank number 7. You cannot skip ranks. William Morgan had to give an oath that he had received the previous ranks in order to petition for the Royal Ark. Here, Heber C. Kimball is saying, nope, I was a Master Mason, I went and appealed for the 7th rank, I got it. Joseph Smith Sr. approved. His petition was accepted. And see, and here is where he reveals he knows about the anti-Mason movement. As he reported, anti-Masons had burned down the chapter building in Canandaigua. He made the blunder of assuming that there were no records preserved of those who were members and those who were the one who was the Master Mason. Oops. We know exactly who was the Master Mason. The records were preserved. It's Heber C. Kimball who can't prove that he was any of this. But in his lie, he reveals the truth of what he did know. Heber C. Kimball is that enemy who were seeking to find out who did this and get revenge. Heber C. Kimball got Brigham Young. They joined in 1832. They immediately recruited the other Scottish Rites from their hometown, saying, we found them. Here we go. Let's get them. Increased in number, increased in rank, couped the church in 1838, the leadership, then had Joseph murdered. It was all Danites who escorted Joseph and Hiram to Carthage jail, except for my third great-grandfather, John Solomon Fulmer, who was the only member of the Nauvoo Legion that was with Joseph Smith in the Nauvoo Legion. That's why Joseph only trusted John Solomon Fulmer with the super sacred knowledge and made sure that he was not there so that his lineage, bloodline, would merge with Hiram's. That in the future, the capstone Christ, to be born on March 17th, would help get Mormons who hearken to his voice, verse 40, second vision, out of the great and abominable church. Willard Richards and John Taylor were a part of Brigham's 12. In July of 19th, 1840, Joseph knew who would betray him, because he talks about the Last Supper. He also talks about the latter days and the threat to America that this Judas group would seek to overthrow the government and return to a monarchy. Call it the Kingdom of Zion, rather than the true Zion in southern Illinois, the mountain cities of Zion and New Jerusalem. Mountains are delta-shaped. The two delta symbols, when combined together, is the Star of David, the bloodline of the Holy Grail. The six-pointed star. The symbol of Emmanuel, with the circle around it. And so Willard Richards and John Taylor were sent by Brigham and Heber to make sure that Joseph and Hiram were assassinated. In the Joseph Smith papers, there is a forged document by Brigham Young claiming to be by Joseph Smith, because the church is not concerned about anybody actually studying and finding out that the church is a fraud and the enemy to America. They don't believe anybody's going to actually study and research it anymore. I did. Joseph also sent a letter to his wife Emma. The handwriting doesn't match. The letter to Brigham Young said, "Come back from talking about me running for president of the United States. We're going to war." Joseph willingly gave up to go to Carthage. He didn't go to war. The whole Nauvoo expositor thing, Joseph wasn't there. They voted without Joseph. They caused it. And then Joseph talks about that incident, thinking that it was in accordance with the law. He didn't realize that he was being framed for it until he was getting framed for everything that the Danites had been doing all those years, to get Joseph out of the way so that Brigham could lead the church. The 1838 coup was about election fraud at Adam-on-Diamond, the secret headquarters of the Danites. They were mocking Joseph. They had purposely joined the church to turn the Book of Mormon into another testament of Jesus Christ, to say that it was Jesus who is their Christ, just like Christians did to the Jews under Constantine, and thus planned to destroy Joseph's church. And the only way to get more Mormons to come with Brigham was because he had already been telling everybody, all the converts, that it's the Church of Jesus Christ. Joseph gave Brigham license to tell people about the Book of Mormon in the United States, and says it's the Church of Latter-day Saints, because it was after 1834. But Brigham forged a document for him to go to Europe, now calling it the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You see in the Joseph Smith history that Willard Richards calls it the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. In the Joseph Smith papers, no, it's the Church of Latter-day Saints. They were purposely tampering with Joseph's church, lying to converts. That's why Joseph wrote the 1838 visionary account. It's because of his missionaries telling converts the wrong information. And so he told them the correct information, but couldn't come out and confess what really happened in the history. So the second vision matches Lehi's second vision in the first chapter of 1 Nephi in the Book of Mormon. It's because he's talking about the latter days and our Christ in the latter days, who he says will be a Mormon. Section 103, verse 16. And so the mob came from the Warsaw Lodge. The governor of Nauvoo sent a letter to this mob not to go forward with their execution. They disregarded the letter from the governor. When they got to the jail, Willard Richards had already gotten the wine. He got a 6-shooter for himself, because he now saw that Hiram has a single shot and Joseph has a 6-shooter. Oh, crap. He's got to make sure they die. And so, yeah, he made an excuse to leave so that he can get a 6-shooter. The mob arrives at the jail, and we know the time because of John Taylor's watch when Joseph shot him. They had their faces painted black, like the Lamanites, who were white but then turned black because of their wickedness. That's what the Book of Mormon meant by that. But you thought it was literal history, because the church told you it was literal history. They went up the stairs single file. They could not bring their rifles. They had to leave them outside of the jail. The rifles were super huge long. And as such, they're not going to fit. They're going to be too awkward. How are you going to try to get them to get through the door and to fire? And if you didn't understand the rifles, or the rifles that they had, it's a one shot at a time rifle. You put in the powder, you put in the ball, tamp it down, aim, fire. Put more powder, put another ball, aim, fire. We're talking, this is far more impossible of a story than the JFK assassination. But, both John Taylor and Willard Richards not only lied in their reports to the Mormons about what happened, they even contradicted each other. They didn't even think to get together and figure out how they were going to explain this. I guess they thought that if they came up with their own stories, the Mormons would believe them both and not question it. But yeah, they didn't go to the trial where the accused were acquitted. The accused were the ones who were shot by Joseph as they were going up single file without their rifles. Joseph was waiting at the top of the stairs with his 6-shooter. He didn't stay in the room. He had a 6-shooter. They were coming up unarmed. He shot, he fired, hit 3 of them. They scrambled out of the jail. Because Joseph had a gun. Everybody run. Joseph Smith's got a gun. Should I put that in the theme song below? Not quite, because She did it for Johnny. And so Joseph had 3 balls left in the pistol. He used them on John Taylor. John Taylor took that opportunity to wrestle the single shot from Hiram. It went off up through his jaw, felled him to the ground. So Joseph, looking back into the room, hearing the shot, sees John Taylor over the body of his brother and shoots the remaining 3 balls at John Taylor, one of which hit in his watch, because it is the size of a pistol, not a rifle. They have different sizes so that you can distinguish between them. You know, scientific forensic investigation. And so it was 4:16 when Joseph shot John Taylor. John Taylor, as we know, scrambled under the bed as a coward. Joseph then went back into the room because, tending to wounds takes time. And so Joseph was mourning over his brother. Willard Richards came out from the corner that he was hiding in with his 6th shot, shot Joseph in the back, took his body, dumped it out the window to the well where the mob was able to get their muskets, and then proceed firing over and over and over and over again in the manner that I told you. And yes, he had a Jupiter stone, Jewish mysticism, not witchcraft. Jupiter stone. Jupiter from Revelation chapter 12. That's the man-child that is born of the Virgin Virgo. Because Jupiter retrogrades in the constellations for a pregnancy period before moving on to the next constellation. It's now in Aries right now, as it will retrograde in Aries for a pregnancy period to leave to fulfill its prophesied end on 8 April 2024. See, the 6th of April 2024 is the Saturday, 7th is the Sunday, 8th is the Monday. Joseph Smith knew that the Saturday would be when Mormons who survive would be assigned their lots, have their tents all set up, because Zion isn't built. Sunday would be the wedding feast, the wedding supper feast of the Lamb at the tent temple, tabernacle. Like Moses and the Exodus. Man like Moses. And then Monday, everything's fulfilled. I covered this in the Book of Mormon series videos that I did. That's the plan that they hoped that Mormon would be able to figure it all out. And so then Willard Richards came back over the body of Hiram, shot him right here. That caused the blood stain on the floor. The mob had no interest in murdering Willard Richards and John Taylor. They had no interest in Hiram. Because they didn't go back up to make sure that everything else was taken care of. Or, yeah, Willard and John were in on it and had been talking with them and had staged the scene. They had a pistol shot through the door of the room in the jail, and they tried to claim that that's what shot Hiram right here. There's a problem though. It's too low. It would have shot Hiram right about in this area. But I don't think they had forensic investigation back in those days. So I don't think they even knew anybody would check on this. But such is the way it was. So yeah, Brigham and Heber paid 20 pieces of silver or 30 pieces of silver, depending on which Bible story you're referring to about Judah or Judas, and then rewarded Willard Richards and John Taylor for their loyalty. That's how you follow the money. Brigham Young had changed the design of the outside of the Nauvoo temple to put the inverted pentagram at the sun at noonday position, with the rising sunstone of Joseph Smith at the bottom, having been conquered, and the Star of the Jews at the top, setting. Brigham Young's Illuminati had conquered, just as they've done so many times, and was giving the clear signal that they now had taken possession of a whole church, because it was a church and a civil organization to attack America with, and then unite them as one in a theocracy for the New World Order. So Brigham Young sent them a clear message. And when he got to the valley, yeah, his son Don Carlos is the one who sculpted the Eagle Gate with the inverted pentagram that now points to the state capital of Utah, just as the roads are designed to be an inverted pentagram pointing to the White House front door. And so, yeah, the inverted pentagram on the keystone of the doors of the Salt Lake Temple that Brigham Young had ordered to be designed. And because of his rebellion against the United States, he did not get to see the completion of the Salt Lake Temple. But the Logan Temple has it at the window, the keystone of the window. So, but yeah, that's what Joseph Smith knew, is that they would do that to his church. And Joseph did know in 1840. He had figured out who it was. And thus prophesied that on the 17th of March, 1970, would be born the Mormon in the Great and Abominable Church, who would be raised up to restore Joseph Smith's church, being the Holy Grail of Mormonism to any and all Mormons who would hearken to his voice and leave the church. Whereas the Great and Abominable Church twisted the scriptures to claim that Jesus is coming to destroy America and restore Zion. It's a big difference. So, that's the sad tale, or the hope. Unfortunately, it's a sad tale. We're in the final year, and Mormons aren't willing to listen. Oh, you're not listening. As I'm going to bed, set it all up in the morning, put it on.